And now I would like to turn it over to Sawyer House.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Sawyer House. I am the Division of Library and Information Services State Data Coordinator, and I'm just sharing my screen. Y'all can see my slides. Is that correct? Just want to
Yes.
double check and make sure. All right. So again, my name is Sawyer House. Um, you can reach me at 850-245-6636 or sawyer.house@dos.fl.gov. I'm responsible for the annual statistical report that is collected each year. We are reporting on the fiscal year 2024 to 2025, starting October 1st. So the window to report your data is from October 1st to December 1st. 2025, and you'll be reporting on um, all of the events and the data that occurred in the past fiscal year. So in this webinar, we're going to quickly go through why do we gather and report the data, some of the reasons for why data elements might change. The data elements evolve over time. We're going to talk about the specific annual statistical report um, that you have to report on right now, and then we'll briefly touch on changes for 25-26. So why gather and report the statistics? We use the statistics at the local and state levels. At the state level, we are looking at the trends across all public libraries in Florida. It helps to assess the needs of your patrons at the local level. It helps assist in providing evidence of your community and statewide library impact. You can certainly use the data that we collect to bring this information to, say, commissioners or show the impact of your library to your specific community. At the state level, we're collecting state totals, which are beneficial for showcasing the story of public libraries across Florida as a whole. You can use the data to inform budgeting decisions, and the most important thing is you're telling your library story. We always talk about data-driven storytelling, and if you collect the data, that it's right there. It's real easy to share your story if you already have a process in place to collect the necessary data that shows what's happening in a library. You know, Another thing that I have been very partial towards is I like to make the data displays on our webpage readily accessible. So one thing that I like to do is take the data that y'all submit, and we've been adding it each year to this Florida Public Library data dashboard, um, which allows a deeper dive into individual data points. And you can check that out at bit.ly/Florida Library Data on our data and statistics webpage. At the national level, the data provides information to policy makers, and it's useful to researchers, journalists, and the public. Before we continue to the 2024 to 2025 annual statistical report itself, are there any questions? Adam has said in the chat, can a link be added to the chat for that page? Yes, Rebecca, would you be able to grab a link for the data webpage and throw it into the chat, please?
Sure.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions before we move on? Okay. So the bulk of what I want to talk about is any changes and new questions that are going to show up for the 2024 to 2025 annual statistical report. So we have a few things that are different this year, but by and large, everything is mostly the same. We've added some new questions. Um, there's some new questions about digital collections and new circulation questions. We've added a question about whether or not your library does automatic renewal of physical materials. It's a simple yes, no. Um, we're seeking the number of meeting rooms, and then we have two sets of basically yes, no questions. Does your library lend laptops and tablets? And does your library lend Wi-Fi hotspots? Um, those are by and large the new sets of questions. The changes, we've changed a few of the definitions um, and then broken out a few different questions for certain items. So collections, expenditures, we've added a couple items to the list that you can count as collections expenditures. And I'm going to go through each of these slide by slide. So don't worry if you're not getting all of it right this second. Children's circulation has been changed up a bit. We've changed the definition of reference transactions slightly. We've added some further definitions for ILL. In the previous statistical report, there was a question that said, does your library receive, for friends of the library, do you have funds that are expended by an endowment or library foundation? And it was kind of a joint question. And we've split those out so that it's really should be two different data elements of do you have funds that are expended by an endowment or funds expended by a library foundation. They were joined together, we're splitting them out. There's a question about, did your library close outlets due to a major event? It's a yes, no question, and we've added a quick follow-up question just to make sure that we get all the necessary information, which is basically, what is the event? If you don't mind sharing out, what event caused your library outlet to close? And then we are no longer collecting web visits. So that is a quick draft of some of the changes, and we'll go into each one of those in the next few slides. So when you report your data, you're going to be using the Counting Opinions webpage, florida.countingopinions.com, really fl.countingopinions.com. This is the data collection vendor. So you'll use your username and password. If you don't have your username or password, you'll just email me and I will provide the credentials to get in. And when you enter, it'll look like this, and all you have to do is click the enter button. You can also technically click data input up in the top right corner of the page. It's on the blue banner that says data input, but just clicking enter gets you to the data input page as well. When you enter, you'll have all of the questions, all 160 something questions, performance indicators, but we're just going to go over kind of some of the changes that you can expect. So in digital collections, we have added, we've updated ebooks so that you can count e-comics as part of your count for the collections in ebooks. And then we've also added 3 questions. These are national questions that are being asked across all the states that participate in this data collection. We're asking, did the administrative entity provide access to ebooks that are purchased solely by the administrative entity? The administrative entity would be your library system. If you're not familiar with that particular term, that's just a national terminology that the National Collection of Data is using. So it's a yes or no question. Did your library provide access to ebooks that were purchased primarily or solely by your library? The next question is ebooks via collective. Did the administrative entity provide access to ebooks that are purchased via a consortium or a cooperative or another similar group at the local, regional, or state level? So if you participated in some kind of consortial purchase or cooperative purchase, and you're providing access to those ebooks, you would say yes to that particular question. And then ebooks via state is along the same line of thinking, but it's saying, did the administrative entity provide access to ebooks provided by the state library agency or another agency at no or minimal cost to the administrative entity? The ebooks via state is auto-filled for you because we already have the answer. So you'll just see that you don't need to answer that particular question. Are there any questions on this particular slide? Cloud Library, um, I don't know about Cloud Library specifically. What I will say is it basically you just kind of have to follow the money. If who is funding Cloud Library, um, if it's a collective purchase or cooperative purchase for the Cloud Library, then you would say yes, you're providing ebooks via collective. If your library specifically is the only one paying for it, then you're providing it through the administrative entity. Does that answer your question, Jennifer? Yes. Well, hang on. I have two comments. So Matthew David, I'm guessing we will count just the cloud library titles we purchased, not the shared titles. Um, yes, that is correct. And we have, if you go to the data webpage, there's a whole, um, it's an infographic flow chart that talks about exactly how you will count the collections for digital collections. Um, and that'll get more into actually counting the number of titles. For the ebooks via collective question, that's a simple yes, no question. If you've provided access to collective purchases, then your answer would be yes. And then Amy, yes, for ebooks via collective, we participate with one other library through reciprocal lending. We do not purchase with the other library, but we have access. I think based on the definition, Amy, that you are providing access to ebooks purchased via consortium or cooperative or other similar group. I think you would say yes, Amy Ackerman. I would say that should count as collective. Lois, I agree. Um, it would be it's a collective collection. So the answer would be yes, I believe. Are there any other questions about this particular set of questions? Or have I muddied the water thoroughly? All right, let's move on to the next next slide, and you'll start to see a pattern here. We have added, as part of digital collections, e-serials. So we are asking that you report the number of e-serials that are available in your library collection. E-serials are periodic digital publications equivalent to printed newspapers, magazines, and similar media that are viewed as entire issues rather than as single articles returned from a research query. And once again, we will ask, did you provide e-serials or provide access to e-serials via an administrative entity, which is essentially the library system? Um, did you provide access to e-serials via a collective? And did you provide access to e-serials via state? For all digital collection items, we're now asking those three questions. So you'll see those pop up again and again for the next few slides. Any questions about e-serials? Amy, I'm not positive one way or the other with your question. Amy asked, are we counting total number of issues or just the number of unique titles? This is a new question that was introduced by the other state data coordinators. So I don't want to answer your question yet. I would prefer to reach out to the other state data coordinators and see how it's being counted across other states. And then I can reach back out with a response. So I am writing your question down and I will follow up. Wendy Bost writes, we only provide them at times via binge passes on Hoopla, so I am not sure how we can count them. Vicky Stever says, in a collective in which the administrative entity pays membership fees, which is used for collection development in the shared service, how is that reported? Provide them at times via binge passes. How we can count them. Wendy, I will get back to you as well. And I'll send a follow-up email basically immediately after this meeting and share conclusions of these questions out with all registrants, so that if you're wondering the same question, you have the same question, you'll also get the response. And then for Vicky Stever's question, in a collective in which the administrative entity pays a membership fee, which is used for collection development in the shared service, how's that reported? I think that would still fall under how we have traditionally counted digital collections. But let me get back to you, Vicky, on that. You're asking about actually counting the number, and not just is it e-serials via collective or e-serials via administrative entity. Is that correct? Well, okay. I see where you're going, I think. It could be a no on administrative entity, but it's definitely a yes. If, for example, Niceville Public Library was paying for its own access to e-serials, then they would say, yes, they have provided it through themselves, but yes, they're also providing access through a collective purchase. Does that make sense? Or if you're talking about the MLC, I still think that would be a yes, definitely on collective. And then if an individual library also is saying that they spent their own money on these digital collections content, then it can be yes to both, is kind of what I'm getting at. Any other questions on e-serials before we move forward? All right, digital collections, downloadable audio units. We're already collecting just the same that we've always been as far as the number of downloadable audio units, but we are adding additional questions for audio downloadable units. Is it, are you providing access via the administrative entity? Are you providing access via a collective? And then are you providing access via the state? Similarly, we're asking those same three questions about downloadable video units. We're also asking about research databases. And this, I believe we are going to talk a little bit more further. Um, in the previous, all right, let's pause on this. Amy Ackerman has asked, what if video is streaming and not downloadable? The term downloadable is also it's inclusive of streaming. So if it's streaming that the library's paying for, then it's all part of that same general concept. Research databases. Last year, you had questions about just the total electronic databases. There has been a slight change in the language for this year's survey, and this is also a national question that changed ever so slightly. We're now splitting out, we're calling databases research databases specifically, and they have a new definition. Research databases are organized collections of electronic data or records, for example, facts, abstracts, articles, bibliographic data, text, photographs, that can be searched to retrieve information. Don't consider resources available for free when answering these questions. Basically, the point of this question is to get at research databases, and then we split out online learning platforms, and that is its own question, and I'll show you that on the next slide. So when you're thinking about research databases, think truly like research. And we're asking, did you provide access via admin entity, collective, and state? So online learning platforms is a new question. Um, Online learning platforms primarily provide instruction, tools, and resources to enhance education, lifelong learning, and skill building. Platforms may offer homework assistance, language, learning, test preparation, professional development, resume assistance, hobby instruction, etc. And just like the research databases, don't consider resources available for free when answering the following questions. This is just the plain definition of what we're looking for when we discuss online learning platforms. And we are asking for the number of online learning platforms that are in your collection. And of course, the three um, questions about where are you providing, from where is your access being provided? Is it via the admin entity, the collective, or a state? Are there questions about online learning platforms? I know this is a newer question that we haven't done before. So we may kind of be, I won't be surprised if we have lots of emails back and forth about, does this count as an online learning platform? And that's totally fine. Yes. The slides are going back out in an email when this is all over, but I'm happy to go back one slide. And then Patty DePiero has asked, what about CraftC through Overdrive? Patty, are you able to share with us what CraftC is? I just don't know what CraftC is. And I'm writing that down as well so that I can follow up. Patty, I believe that you would count that as an online learning platform. That's my personal take on that would be counted as an online learning platform. I think what the state data coordinators initially were really trying to do is basically set up two buckets. Is this a research bucket or is this just general learning bucket? And I think that was the intent of these questions. And so I recommend as you go through and you're trying to figure out, where does this fall? If the intent is learning and it happens to be online, um, then I would count it as an online learning platform. If the intent is research, then research database. But I mean, yes, contact me if y'all get stuck and you're just not sure about something and you're not sure which bucket it should belong to. Um, you know, Vicky Stever says, rule of thumb, if you pay extra for that service, it should count as a separate service, even if accessed through the same platform, like Craftsy and Overdrive. Correct, it should count as a separate service. That makes sense to me, Vicky. I don't know why we wouldn't treat it that way. Katrina, is it okay if I move forward with the slides? All right, thank you. So we're reporting the number of online learning platforms, and then you're answering the yes/no questions. That's digital collections, but we also have some changes with digital content circulation. We are asking for the circulation of ebooks, the circulation of e-serials, the circulation or usage of audio downloadable units, the usage or circulation of video downloadable units. And the plan is that you would take all of these usage numbers, add them together, and that is the total use of electronic materials. So this slide, we're just looking at ebook circulation, e-serial, audio downloadable unit, and video downloadable unit numbers 99 through 102 will sum to become 103, which is use of electronic materials. That's the total electronic circulation, electronic usage, and use of electronic materials is summed with the physical item circulation and then the other non-traditional library material circulation to give us the total annual circulation of materials. And that's item 104. And then 104 well, let's pause there. Use of electronic materials, 103 is added to 105, successful retrieval of electronic information, to give us the total electronic content use. Successful retrieval of electronic information would be the usage of your databases, things that are not necessarily circulated. Patty says, do we just disregard circulation that can't be classified as 99 to 102? So Patty, what might be an example of that, if you don't mind my asking? Hmm. I don't think the survey as it's set up right now is prepared for puzzles. Um, in those are digital puzzles, I'm assuming. I mean, we have physical puzzles like other circulating physical items. So we're prepared for that. But is that a digital puzzle? I think if you're wanting to count that, you might just lump it with on, yeah, that might be something we have to investigate for the next year. I'm not sure, because I suppose you could include it as one of the subsets so that it is included as your use of electronic materials number. So I'm gonna have to get back to you, Patty. That's a good question. And Lois, I'm sorry, I'm not sure. You're saying that the difference between 104 and 107, what is that referencing? Oh, I see. So yes, 104 is circulating items, 107 total collection use, is basically annual circulation, plus successful retrieval of electronic information, which would be collection items that are used, but they don't necessarily circulate. The usage of the databases, and I think the online learning platforms would count as part of that as well. Um, that's what 107 is looking at, is the total collection use, not just strictly items that are circulated that go out and then will eventually at some point come back. Or for digital, it'd be things that have a specific time that, a patron can check it out. Sorry, I'm with you. Charles, this is back to ebooks. We use Hoopla and patrons select on demand, and we have those circulations. When the count or how many we own is asked for, we have access to nearly 1 million items. How is number or ebooks usually approached by others here? Is access equal ownership? We want to be more conservative. Um, all right, so Charles, you're giving access to 1 million items, right? Um, I'm assuming this is a pay per use model. What it really boils down to is the model. If you're leasing the book itself, then you would count the whole collection. But if it's a pay per use model, where even though they have 1 million options, you really, as a library, are only paying for what your patrons use in that 1 million number, then you're only counting what they have actually used as part of your collection. Um, so if they only use 10,000 items, but you have 1 million available, you would count the 10,000, plus anything that you have leased outright. So Charles, I hope that answers your question. And there is, like I said, there's a data flow diagram essentially that talks about how to make that decision. It's on the data webpage. Jennifer, please remind me, are the items with the green check mark auto-calculated fields? Yes, that's correct. So they're pulling from previous entries. That is correct, Jennifer. Wendy has a question. Wendy, do you have a question?
Sawyer, it might be easier for me to ask you because
I'm happy to. Yeah.
so I don't pull the stats normally from Hoopla, so bad me. Someone else on here might know that, but you know, we could have a title that we buy that has 100 copies. Well, let me rephrase that. I'm not even going to talk about those. If we're limiting this to the titles that people use, I'm not sure in Hoopla how we know that level. Can we get that level? In other words, not count the circs, but count titles used. I know someone on here is smarter than I am or uses this more than I do. Do you see what I'm saying? You're saying only count the titles that are used, but then we're counting copies in a way.
Um, yes, I understand that dilemma with the digital collections. I believe we've spoken about this. I know I've spoken to my supervisor about this, because she's also very well versed in digital collections. Um, it's kind of a challenge that we don't always get the perfect data, but we're trying at least to get the best data when it comes to these digital collections because, you know, should we be counting unique titles? Well, if it's available and you can get the data, then sure, but that's not always the case depending on the vendor that you're using, right? Um, so my best advice in that regard is the general rule of thumb is try to use your circulation data. If you're able to sift through the circulation data and actually get just the unique titles from your vendor, then that is technically a better number for your collection, but it can be a pain to get that information. Um, so it just kind of depends on what your vendor's providing to you. But as a rule of thumb, try to use at least the circulation data, especially if it's pay-per-use. Karen says Hoopla has a report for unique titles borrowed for a given time period. So Hoopla, you should be able to do that for Hoopla. Um, thank you, Karen. And I'm sorry, I think I have Vicky as well. So Vicky, the administrative entity definition and administrative entity for a cooperative would be the cooperative itself. Thank you for asking that. I don't think I addressed that earlier. So Okaloosa County Public Library Cooperative, the cooperative as a whole is the administrative entity with member units. Now this is just going off of the national definitions actually. So I guess what I said earlier about if Niceville purchases something, um, separate from the cooperative, then that doesn't quite work for those definitions. Because the administrative entity by definition is looking at, for your specific instance, would be Okaloosa County Library Cooperative. I don't know if that really answers your question. Vicky, do you have any follow-up questions? I'm sorry. Well, the member libraries are still reporting the number of purchases. It's just that yes, no question. And what we would do anyways is probably say that if one of the libraries says yes, then for the cooperative as a whole, the answer is yes. But it shouldn't change really because that question's, yeah, I'm sorry, Vicky. So yeah, to continue reporting the numbers themselves, as you always have been. Because we can come up with a total for the cooperative, and we can also look at the individual member libraries that are reporting their purchases. The way that you've been counting your numbers has been fine the past few years. It's just those yes/no questions. But for a yes/no question, if it's asking about admin entity, technically that is talking about the for y'all, the cooperative, Okaloosa County Cooperative. So I'm sorry, I hope that helps. So continuing with just some of the changes, excuse me. For electronic materials expenditures, we've just added one additional thing that you can include as an electronic material expenditure, which is online learning platform expenditures, just to kind of keep the digital collections in line with the expenditures that are associated. And then for other material expenditures, we've added if you have expenditures for circulating portable electronic devices. And that vague terminology is getting at like tablets, laptops. I suppose if you're circulating cell phones, I don't know if anybody's doing that, but I suppose if you were, or any other portable electronic devices that you're circulating, then include the expenditures for that in other materials. Children's circulation, this is one of those state data coordinators across at the federal level, national level, we changed it. So they're asking for the circulation of children's digital materials. And so we're also going to ask for the circulation of children's physical materials, just so that you can kind of see that those go hand in hand to give the total circulation of children's materials. And this is saying kind of what I just mentioned. We'll sum the circulation of children's physical materials and the circulation of children's digital materials to give item 95, which is the circulation of children's materials. We've added a new question, item 97. Did your library offer automatic renewal for any physical materials during the reporting period? And then there's a note, patrons do not have to take any action for automatic renewals. The ILS rules determine how or when automatic renewals occur. It's a simple yes/no question. We've updated the traditional reference transaction language slightly. This is also a national change. The previous language said unscheduled instruction and assistance, amongst much, a lot more to this definition, but essentially the change is we changed unscheduled instruction and assistance to be scheduled and unscheduled instruction and assistance. If you didn't quite collect scheduled instruction and assistance this past fiscal year, that's okay. Just report what you have been collecting for the past fiscal year, and then know that for next year, we're technically counting scheduled and unscheduled instruction and assistance. We've added the number of meeting rooms available to the public, and the definition of a meeting room for now is a meeting room is a separate reservable space available for public use. And so you'd report one total across all of the outlets in your library system We've added clarification to the interlibrary loan definition. You'll see this just at the very top part of the resource sharing section. An interlibrary loan involves some level of library staff member involvement in lending or borrowing the library material. Patty has asked, how do you want us to handle dividable spaces? I'm assuming you're referring to the meeting spaces. Do we count all versions of the space A, B, etc.? Let's just go back to the definition. Separate reservable space available for public use. If it's dividable, I would say count it as if it's fully in its divided. In other words, to your benefit, if it's one large space that can hold technically 4 meeting spaces, then count it as 4. Does that help? Study rooms can be included. Yes. Joyce says, please confirm if that can also include exterior spaces, as long as it's, yes, that's fine. There's nothing in there that says asking about interior or exterior, as long as it's part of the library budget or the library, it's part of the library, then that would be fine. Are the maker spaces being used as meeting rooms at any given moment? Sheldon? We tried to keep the definition relatively broad. So if you feel like y'all are the locals, you know your libraries way better than I do. So if you look at that definition and you think that your, for example, your makerspace relatively fits into that, then go ahead and count it. Because from what you're saying, they can sometimes be co-working spaces, then that if it sometimes is a meeting space, then you can count it as a meeting space for the purpose of this question. We've added questions about laptops, tablets, and Wi-Fi hotspots. So the first question is, does your library lend laptops or tablets? And there are actually 3 possible answers. Yes, we lend laptops for in-house use as well as outside use. Or yes, we only lend laptops or tablets that are specifically for in-house use, or simply, no, we don't do that. And then the next question, does your library lend Wi-Fi hotspots? Yes or no? Any questions about laptops, tablets, Wi-Fi hotspots? If your answer is yes at any point during the past fiscal year, then I would say yes for that fiscal year, and then moving forward, if you discontinue the program at some point, then moving forward, we'll catch your no response in the next statistical report. That's in response to John Crowley. Okay, moving forward. In the previous annual statistical report, we combined funds expended on behalf of your library or donated to your library by both the Library Foundation and the endowment funds. And from a data standpoint, trying to combine Library Foundation funds and endowment funds is not best practice. So we have actually split that out into 2 different questions. So one question is funds expended on your behalf by a library foundation. And then the other question is funds expended on behalf of your library by an endowment fund. So we're splitting library foundation and endowment fund into two separate questions. For Matthew David, yes, money donated by friends already had its own question, and that was not muddied in the previous report. So we're still asking about money donated by friends. It was just those two particular, the foundation and the endowment were intertwined, and we were trying to untangle them. If it's your foundation's endowment fund, I think I would just count it as foundation. Yes, Amber. For the emergency response section, we added a follow-up question to, did you close your outlet due to a major event? This is strictly just to identify what event caused your library outlets to close. And it helps for me and the data department if, for example, I want to track the impact of a hurricane that goes through. I can actually see, okay, well, you closed for a hurricane. What other libraries closed for this specific hurricane? That is an example of why we're asking this question. It just helps to see kind of the impact of major events across multiple library outlets or multiple library systems. That's a good question, Amy. Technically, it's not the reason you closed the the outlet. Did you have other did you have to change programming or any other services because of the emergency that occurred? Okay. Because we have other questions as well in this emergency questions that kind of gets at that. Or perhaps did you have staff that were reassigned at any point for that emergency? So you might, I guess my point is, you could say yes, the outlet was closed due to a major event if you know that you also had other impacts because of that major event. If you had absolutely no impacts other than that it closed, then you are already planning the closure, then I don't know if it's necessary. But yes, in your particular case for that kind of scenario, I would say yes, it closed to a major event, and then there are a series of follow-up questions in the survey, and you would indicate that yes, staff were reassigned because of this major event. Does that make sense? 162A is basically the intro question to the emergency questions section. And so then we have a bunch of follow-up questions. And so for you, you would say yes, because you were impacted. And then you would talk about the impact on the follow-up questions. That is all of the changes and new questions. Last update is that we are no longer requesting the number of web visits for your library. You are welcome to continue tracking that at the local level, but at the state level, we do not need that number. So with that, I am Sawyer House. I am the state data coordinator. If you have any questions at all about reporting your statistics, my email is sawyer.house@gos.fl.gov, and I'm happy to stick around and answer any other questions you may have. Thank you so much for asking such good questions and stumping me on occasion. But thank you, and y'all have a lovely time. Just email me, reach out if y'all ever have questions as you're reporting this year. Thank you.